The amount of content that I've consumed since Riot Games put their foot down in this argument of LCS Players Association versus Riot and trying to demand players' rights, with Riot now threatening to cancel the entire summer split if all sides can't come to an agreement and return to play in 2 weeks, it's absurd. I mean, I'm watching LS right now watch Hassan, who's on with the president of the LCSPA, who's also on with Slat. Like, it's actually kind of funny because I guarantee you more people are talking about the LCS right now than they have been in the last 5 years combined. Drama is always a good thing, which goes to speak to entertainment over competition, but that's again a whole thing for a different day. I'm not going to sit here and try and recap everything for you. If you want that, LS I believe has a video out on it, Germ has a video out on it, I'm sure Travis will have a video out on it. Quite frankly, I don't care about what's happened already. The only thing that I care about is what can happen over the next 2 weeks or potentially the next 6 months until we see players on the Rift again to get us there quicker than the rest. Who holds power? Who can actually do stuff in negotiations? Who can't? And the truth is something that not a lot of people are going to like, especially if you are with the players and you stand on their side. They have nothing. There is nothing that the LCSPA can do ultimately in this situation. The cold hard truth is that the best case scenario for the LCS Players Association to get what they want is to sack the summer split, because Riot is not joking with them when they say that they will cancel it. Sack the summer split and use that entire time to unionize and try and come back into these conversations in 5 months with actual lawyers, with everybody present in the room that can actually form a collective bargaining agreement, and then maybe, just maybe, you will actually be able to get things that you want done. But even then, Riot owns the IP, and I'm willing to bet more than anything that Riot is willing to sack the LCS just to grow other regions. It would suck, obviously, but you don't threaten to cancel an entire split and actually mean it, because Riot's not bluffing, without ultimately not worrying whether NA goes down the tube or not because the players are jerks. Riot's not going to give up that power that they have. Nobody in their right mind would. You don't even have to watch any sort of television show like Suits or anything else like that to just know that when you're in a position of power, you don't give up that power. And more importantly, you don't make concessions unless you have to. Like, I get people are going to be mad at me saying that, and they're going to see it as like egotistical, but ultimately that's just business. That's how the world works. We don't live in this ideal world where everybody's going to come to the table and work together. No, it's one side trying to strong arm another. Riot ultimately doesn't want to give any concessions to players that would affect their bottom line, even if it's for $1. Why would they? The question then becomes, what reasonable concessions can Riot make that will literally have almost no impact to them, benefit the LCS and the teams long term, that players or the LCSPA can actually be comfortable with? Because the unfortunate matter is, if the players want their salary for the year and want all these changes as well, they're not going to get it. They're going to bend the knee, they'll give in to Riot, and they'll be on the Rift in 2 weeks. As much as people don't want to hear that, that's the truth. But say we live in that world where a compromise actually is possible here. Let's first obviously go through the list of demands again that the LCS Players Association has and just reiterate all this. Valorant franchising system. Not going to happen. You can sit here and complain all you want about how bad it was that we charged entry fees, that teams have equity and have a say in this. Doesn't matter. Live in the real world. That's not changing. They're not going to dilute their ownership share. They're not going to dilute their revenue percentage that they get, which is already minimal for the total cost that it takes to operate these teams. It's not going to happen. Period. So drop it. Get rid of the point. It's not going to happen. I actually have to pull up the list of demands from the LCSPA just to double check this. So the second thing is that they want to guarantee minimum contracts for the 5 winners of the split. I'm sorry, but that has nothing to do with ultimately growing North America. Sure, it adds some protections in for the winners, but ultimately, I'm sorry, if you win a split on a team, like the odds of you not being on a team the next split, slim to none, assuming the player's actually taking a reasonable salary. So I don't think that that's honestly a negotiating point and does nothing to actually further benefit the future of North American pros and talent development. So I'm going to say scratch that one as well. Third is the guaranteed revenue pool for players in the NACL of $300,000. Here's a compromise. The NACL is already entirely online. We get rid of the California requirement and allow players to live in an area that they can actually afford to live in on a salary of, say, $3,000 to $4,000 a month. Sure. Even then, I'd rather all the money go from LCS teams to colleges, whether that's $200,000 in scholarships or whatever amount you want. Like, I'd rather go to that because colleges can then pay for players to be able to live in terms of their food, their housing, etc. If they want to live from home and they have a college near them, sure. But like, I don't think those minimum salaries are good, because as much as people wanted to hate on Tyler One for saying it, he was right to a certain extent that Academy just has become this recycling ground of talent just going down and coming back up. And like, it's not all players. Like, obviously Dokla is a good example of a player that goes down, spends his time, and is able to work his way back up. But the overwhelming majority of the time, people hit that level and just get comfortable. So I'm more focused on finding a sustainable solution for the NACL that gets players up into the LCS quicker, and that has nothing to do with the amount of money that they are guaranteed making. I'd rather tie it in with something else like colleges, and I think that's more reasonable than just demanding a flat out salary. So that's a compromise I think the LCSPA has to make, but it's in line with the same vein of you're still getting that money for talent development, just not in the way you want it. Finally, the affiliate stuff that lumps in with colleges, they already agree. So Riot's good to go there. Cool. But ultimately, the more I look at the suggestions given by the LCSPA, they honestly do nothing to foster actual North American talent coming up into the LCS. It basically just keeps the same system that we're in set. I get like the 6-month period where people lost their jobs is horrible and sucks. I wish the timing would have been different, but we've ripped that band-aid off. There's no sense putting it back on. Let's figure out a sustainable solution going forward that everybody can compromise on. And I think ultimately the answer has to come from the teams and players with nothing to do with Riot. And the things I would say to that are, first and foremost, I don't know how well this is going to be taken or not, reduce the import rule to 1 and get rid of all grandfathering rules. I'm sorry, but if you want North American talent, you have to guarantee that North American players are going to go in. And at the current state of the LCS, there's no reason for you to pick North American players over amateur talent from other regions like the LCK and the LPL. So you got to do something on your own. Riot's not going to penalize you for restricting the import rule further upon yourself. So I would say for teams, again, down to 1, get rid of the grandfathering rule. You guarantee that you have 4 North American players on the roster. And you know what? If there's good North American players in the system underneath it, they'll eventually start working their way up as you continue to push through talent. Second, I would say is no buyout clauses. I think there should be a reward to a certain extent for teams that, or programs that do a good job of feeding talent into the LCS. There should be some reward, but it should not come at the cost of barring players from getting into the LCS. Like, what I would say is, like, say we ultimately do go the college route and a player from a collegiate program does get signed into the LCS, whatever their starting contract is, that college gets back 10% in its value in additional scholarship funds, which helps them continue to push more players up towards the LCS. It gives them an incentive to want to push talent up. And for the LCS, for teams, I'm not saying you put that cost on the teams because that might be problematic, but that comes from like the revenue pool from the LCS of money that they distribute out from sponsorships. You set a select portion of that fund aside that specifically goes to these programs, and if that doesn't go to that, then you figure out what at the end of the year, the unallocated or unspent funds, what that goes towards. That feels like an actual solution that you can make that will get people invested in promoting talent and growing them and giving people an incentive to do so. You look at college sports, for example, you want to go to Alabama. Why? Because you have the greatest chance of going pro, in addition to winning a national title, going there. Like, why would you not? The school might not get paid for its pros going up there, but it gets paid in prestige and honor. And as of right now, when you don't have that because we're too young, then yeah, you add some sort of financial incentive that doesn't break the bank, but also doesn't do anything else there. God, I'm trying to think of anything else here that I can get for the LCSPA, but I really can't, because I just keep coming back to this thing that, like, the things that they're asking for are band-aids on bullet wounds, and they're not things that are actually attainable in the current system. We need to completely, basically tear this shit down and build it back up. And if Riot cancels the LCS for an entire split, if you think that they're not going to do that themselves, you're out of your mind. On the team side, I ultimately just come back to, once again, pushing the players to unionize. Like, I know players will see this as a bad thing because you're going to have a reduction in salary as you can negotiate a salary cap with teams, but it's also done as a way for teams to not overspend and not screw us in this system. It's a fail-safe against their own intentions, as is stated by the venture capitalist money that they got. But it always comes back to players need to unionize, because the LCSPA has absolutely no power in any circumstance in this situation. I don't really know what else to say. I know this is going to be a hard video for a lot of people to hear, but it's the truth. The Players Association in 2 weeks' time, if I had to place my guess, is going to bend the knee to Riot and hopefully get some sort of concession or promise that they're building towards something in the future so that the LCSPA has something that they can brag about that they did. Otherwise, Riot's just going to continue to put their foot down. And I'm sorry, but on all sides, Riot has already made it clear that they will cancel the split. And you can be pissed at them all you want, but at the end of the day, they make that call, and the LCS Players Association has to either figure out a way to do this, or I don't even know. Because it's like, you see people all over social media saying, oh, we need to support the players, we need to do this. I just feel like part of this is people really like not liking the fact that layoffs happen. And it sucks the timing that this happened. I'm not disagreeing that that's not a shitty thing and that it should have waited till the end of the split. I agree, but we're already past that decision and we can't revert it at this point. So going forward, the way you protect the players is by making sure that they have a job, period, and are in this, have an ecosystem to play in that's healthy and sustainable. Because if that goes under, then the players don't have jobs at all, regardless of the salary debates and everything else that we'll eventually have here. And if they want better protections against the teams, actually get a lawyer, actually get an agent to look over your deals to make sure that you don't agree to buyout clauses and all these individual things. Like, players really have to look out for themselves in this situation for years of which they haven't done it before. So like, I'm not blaming players fully for this. They do have to take a good bit of responsibility in some of the actions that have ultimately led up to this situation. But they need to make sure they protect themselves and the other players around them by making sure they all make decisions that are in the best interest of each other. If you're not going to unionize, but you really need to unionize. That's the only way. Anyways, I'm going to keep rambling if I keep going on like this. I should probably edit this, get it up. I will continue to post updates as we can and talk about any developments that come from this. But it's just a really, really interesting time. It's not like any other sport hasn't had to deal with this. They all have. The difference is that, you know, it has forced them into unionizing, and hopefully this forces the players into that as well. So that's all I got. Adios.